What is good, everybody? Welcome, one and all, to TGI Football on the SB Nation NFL show, presented by DraftKings Fantasy Sports. Check out what DraftKings has to offer this season with code SBNFL, because life is more fun when you are in on the action. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions do apply. Void or prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. As noted, this is TGI Football on the SB Nation NFL show. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe, of course, Apple devices, Spotify, etc. You can always watch on the SB Nation NFL YouTube channel as well. If you do any of those things, you will be consumed by the incredible football and really life analysis of myself. I'm RJ Ochoa from Blogging the Boys. They are Bleeding Green Nation Zone. Brandon Lee Gowton and Arrowhead Pride Zone. Stephen Serda. Stephen, happy February to you. February 2nd. Deuce is wild.
Yeah.
Okay, I had a lot of energy, and then yeah.
I mean, I didn't know if am I supposed to be like celebrating the Chiefs are in another Super Bowl, going for back to back. It's against the 49ers again, where the Super Bowl run started. Like, it's all coming full circle, especially in a season where everybody discounted the Chiefs and was like, they're broken, they're not going to get back, and here we are again.
Brandon, you notoriously have a problem with the fact that Stephen is an NFL agnostic and that he chooses to not really support a team. And so while that is kind of already stuck in your craw, does it not get a little bit deeper in there that the team he is sort of, tied to from an allegiance standpoint is this perennially great, always in the mix, always in the Super Bowl, winning world championships, having incredible things, success all the time sort of group?
No. I would say not, because I know Stephen works hard, and when you work hard, I feel like it's only fair that you get to cover a team who actually does something in the playoffs. Maybe you can learn a thing or two about that, RJ.
So you're saying I don't work hard? Just to be very clear, right. That's the implication around here. All right.
Exactly. It's all proportional.
I'd say our colleagues would all probably agree with that. So, shout out to everyone around here who does a lot of great work, like Jeremy Reisman, who's doing a lot of great work about the Detroit Lions, who lost the NFC Championship game. Just as one random example. You know what I mean?
Tough to take shots at the Lions.
I will take shots because that's all I can do. Stephen, will you please explain to the audience what game we will be previewing this week on TGI Football? With the Super Bowl not taking place until next Sunday?
I don't know. Are we previewing the Pro Bowl or something? Because I don't even know what happens there anymore.
Well, we don't have to preview it. I guess we can discuss what we've seen so far. Like, as an example, just randomly off the top of my head, like Brandon, would you like to discuss Jalen Hurts looking all sorts of loss on the passing skills competition and not really hitting any targets, questioning his abilities as a passer, in general? Again, off the top of my head completely.
A very real, applicable one-to-one to actual football is this moving target drill. And even the center thing, which I've seen a clips of Jason Kelce doing that and getting guff for not doing well. And it's not even like that's like a long snapper drill. It's not like a center drill. Anyway, so that's my extent of the Pro Bowl. Has been seeing these clips go around, but not actually really caring at all.
Okay,
I don't even. Is it still in Hawaii? I don't even know where it's at.
No,
it's
I don't
Orlando.
think so. It doesn't feel canonical, right? I think we can all agree with that. Like, it doesn't. Like, I see this happening, but like, what am I gonna do? Like, write a post about this? Like, or no? Like, who cares? None of this matters.
I mentioned this to a friend. So we would agree that like the MLB All-Star Game at the very least has the home run derby, right? Like it's the middle of the summer, so maybe there's like a that day you're like, oh, I'll throw this on in the background while I'm preparing dinner, right? Like you have a kind of a pulse beat level of interest in that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, like it's a good summer night activity.
Right, okay.
Usually, especially because there's nothing else going on. Like that time of year, right? It's just baseball pretty much. So it's just like, yeah, whatever. I'll just put that on.
So we've got that. So even baseball, like the sport who focuses least on marketing themselves as opposed to, the other major sports in America, has that. The NBA, kind of pick what you want, Stephen, but they do have, even if you're not into the All-Star Game, they have the 3-point contest, they have the dunk contest, and those are watered down affairs, but still they're more interesting than really anything happening at the Pro Bowl right now.
Yeah, the NBA All-Star Weekend is an event. I would love to go to one of those. I've never been to one, but they look like a ton of fun, and they're at least like entertaining. Like it's a good television product. I don't know that anything that's going on at the Pro Bowl is an actual good television product at this point.
I have been to one All-Star Weekend. It was in Houston, and it was when Philadelphia 76ers player Andre Iguodala lost the slam dunk contest to Nate Robinson, who jumped over Spud Webb. Oh, he didn't get robbed. He got Robinson. It was Nate Robinson who beat him in that. I mean, did Iggy jump over anybody? No, because Nate Robinson did. So
yeah, he took like 50 attempts to do it.
It wasn't 50. It was maybe 2. Actually, I think it was the first one.
It was more.
Okay, well, I was there in person. Were you? No, that's right. I saw it. Thank you very much. Boom, case closed. We have no games to discuss. So instead, what we're going to do is basically rip on all of the new NFL head coaches. I think that sounds like a fun and worthwhile activity. Now that all of the vacancies have been filled ahead of the Pro Bowl, if you want to look at that as kind of a point of demarcation. So I guess let's start in reverse chronological order. BLG, you and I were dancing around the idea of Dan Quinn becoming the Washington Commanders head coach. And I don't want to put words in either of our mouths, but we were kind of like, there's no way that they would do this because this would be such a fail. Now, while we recorded the NFC's mixtape, Ben Johnson announced that he basically didn't want this job. Again, I am kind of putting words in his mouth there. But Dan Quinn is the newest head coach of the Washington Commanders. There's a real incestual nature to the NFC East, what with Kellen Moore now as the offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles.
I really don't get this hire for the Commanders. Like, this is former NFC South coach who lost in the Super Bowl and has been kind of middling. Okay, am I talking about Ron Rivera? Am I talking about Dan Quinn there? I mean, it's just like, how is this a needle moving kind of decision? It just feels all about raising the floor, which is not what the Commanders should really be so much concerned about. They should be shooting for the stars. They should be going for high upside, exciting. Because unlike a lot of other teams, they have a bigger grace period than so many other organizations because of coming off of Dan Snyder to a new ownership. So, like, I just think they should be swinging for the fences, and I don't think that's what they're doing here at all. I mean, how do you sell? Oh, we're hired the right guy for us to finally get us over the hump, this back to our glory days, is the guy who oversaw the worst Super Bowl collapse in NFL history. Like, how are you selling that as what is this great thing about the new era of Commanders football, especially when it should all be about, hey, we have the number 2 pick. We're going to get this offensive mastermind in here to pair with him to really, have him take over. And instead, we're hiring this guy who has a good track record as a defensive coordinator, head coach, been mediocre. I think it's tough to go from the idea of Ben Johnson or even Mike McDonald, who also defensive guy, but like this on the cusp of maybe this new kind of defensive thinking in the NFL, something exciting, as opposed to a retread and maybe bringing in Chip Kelly as your offensive coordinator. Like, are you serious? Are you kidding me?
You sounded like you had more to say there. Like, you kind of sounded like you got cut yourself off like mid-sentence. I don't know if that was supposed to be for dramatic effect or anything. Stephen, you got that vibe too, right? Like,
yeah, okay, I was not ready. Chip Kelly really just brick walled it, I guess there.
Well, your thoughts, Stephen, on Dan Quinn and whether or not for what it's worth, I was browsing and perusing the Commanders subreddit, and they all hated this. They were so mad at Ben Johnson, and they feel the word I saw was whelmed, not over, not under, but just whelmed.
I think Commanders fans should be disappointed by this. I think we have a large enough sample size of Dan Quinn. We know exactly what he is. And if you wanted Ron Rivera gone and you didn't like where they were going with him, why would you? Like, they weren't going anywhere with him. It feels like the exact same situation here where you're just like, okay, well, we dumped assets last year, cleared out money. We thought we were going to be better than we wound up being, and somehow fell into the number 2 overall pick in the draft. And so we're going to take a quarterback after they just spent half a season trying to convince you that Sam Howell was the franchise quarterback. And that obviously didn't work. And then it makes you question, like, yeah, it seems like the Commanders really went all in on landing Ben Johnson or Mike McDonald and had to wait this thing out and see how things went in the playoffs to make that official. And then it didn't work out in either way. And I want to talk about Mike McDonald because I'm excited for where he landed, but it felt like they pushed all their chips in and then scrambled because they didn't have a backup plan. And it makes you question, like, the new ownership and the direction and everything, because everybody, as soon as the regular season ended, it was, oh, Washington's in a really nice spot. They got new ownership. They're interested in winning now. They've got this draft capital. They got all this money. Like, this is a great spot for a young head coach to come in and really leave his stamp on the organization. And you just had to go in the total opposite direction because you didn't leave yourself a backup plan. If Ben Johnson just decided like, hey, it's really important to me to see this thing through in Detroit. I love the people that I work with. I love the team that we put together. We think we can be right back there. And there's no way that anybody anticipated that, like, because you just don't usually see guys say no to head coaching opportunities. I appreciate the hell out of what Ben Johnson did in this situation. Like, no, I want to go see this thing through. It's more important to me to work with Dan Campbell and the staff and all the guys that we have there. I think that's tremendous. I think not enough people do that. But it also makes me question how that job is viewed now and how Washington is viewed, even with new ownership and the new situation and trying to move in the right direction. Because, like, why wouldn't anybody be interested in that? Like, of course, Dan Quinn is. Of course, Dan Quinn's like, yes. Oh, you're gonna offer me the head coaching job? Absolutely, I'll take it in a heartbeat. Like, it's hard to feel good about any of that. And what was supposed to be an exciting offseason for a franchise that has been bad for a really long time.
I have a lot of thoughts on this, and obviously have shared them throughout the blog and the boys universe. It did seem like a scramble. I think that's pretty obvious. It feels like you both do some, sports wagering, but if you're doing like like one of these prop bet, kind of platforms or whatever, and you've got like one you really like, and you go to add like one to make it the final parlay or whatever you're setting up, and it's like, oh, that one's unavailable, now, and it's like 5 minutes till tip off or kickoff. You're like, oh crap, I need something to fill this out, and you just go like, this one feels good. I'll just add this one. I just I kind of like the way this feels. That's what Dan Quinn kind of feels like. Oh, he's been to a Super Bowl, and the Cowboys defense has been really good for 3 years. So he's a leader of men. Let's just bring him in. He feels, I saw, again, the Commander subreddit had all sorts of great jokes. It was like Dan Rivera, Ron Quinn, like all sorts of great stuff, because they're basically the same person, like the same archetype, same pathway. And BLG, I always love referencing this, how you talk about how opposing fans feel whenever you do something that involves them. Cowboys fans are celebrating, dancing in the street, get Dan Quinn off of our hands. And all these people who are, I don't want to say carrying the water for Dan Quinn, but they're like, oh man, Cowboys fans are going to miss Dan Quinn. The defense has been, remember the Mike Nolan days in 2020? Just because he's better than the worst option of all time does not mean that like you have to marry him. And also, we shouldn't apply what he did in 2021 or 22 for that matter to our current moment. They were awful. I mean, like downright terrible over the second half of this past season, which again is a point that I've been bringing up continually to each of you. There's lots of record to show that I feel this way. So I agree with you, Stephen. Dan, this was the least amount of juice that Dan Quinn ever had in a hiring cycle since he took over as the Cowboys defensive coordinator. In fact, he turned down jobs. He was Ben Johnson. And I think it's kind of a lesson of, your iron will not always stay hot. I think that Ben Johnson would have been, I think we all agree, the best hire, whoever would have hired him this cycle, right? We all would. I think Mike Vrabel would have been the best hire, whoever would have hired him this cycle. I think Bill Belichick would have had a weird kind of best energy around him just because of who he is. And the more I've thought about it, I think they all are looking at next year's cycle and who could, like, what teams could be available and might be more interested. You think about Dallas, Philadelphia, our potential options, New York maybe, or Chicago if Caleb Williams is there, right? Like,
both New York jobs, to be clear.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Maybe Buffalo for that matter, right? Like you can marry yourself. It feels like the Chargers, who had the most desirable variable that any team could have had, Brandon, with Justin Herbert. Those options could be much more in quantity next offseason with the quarterbacks of the teams I just mentioned.
One last thing I want to say in the Commanders part is there was a leak, I guess, from Schefter, seemingly from, I'm guessing, Commanders ownership.
Oh, this was so sad.
This idea that like part of the reason that Ben Johnson, wasn't hired is because his asking price was too high. That is absolute garbage. There's no salary cap for coaches. Fans should not care at all what a head coach is asking for. If you're not hiring a head coach because like you're trying to get a candidate on a budget, that's pathetic. If you love a candidate and he's great, you should take literally whatever it takes to pay him to get him in your building. That should never be an acceptable reason why you did not hire a candidate, is because their asking price was too high. That's ridiculous to me. That's pathetic. I get, Schefter puts that out there because it's part of the game in terms of agents and sources and whatnot. But no fan out there should be using that as a reason. Well, we couldn't get Ben Johnson because you wanted too much money. No, if you're doing that, that is exactly what a billionaire owner wants you to think is acceptable. And I just think it's pathetic.
And again, credit to Ben Johnson for saying, this is what it's going to take for me to leave Detroit. And if you want to give me that, then okay, I'll leave. And and they didn't do it. And that what's also insane about them putting that out there to try to paint this picture of Ben Johnson, like, no, he was being unreasonable. That's why we didn't hire him. Like, they don't have to make coaches' salaries public knowledge. Like, there's lots of head coaches in the NFL. We have no idea what they're making. We just kind of speculate what their salaries are. Like, they didn't. If they could have paid Ben Johnson $25 million a year, and they would never have to tell anyone about that. Like, it's just pettiness by an organization. Which again, like, it's like, okay, new ownership. Are we sure they're headed in the right direction now? All of a sudden, because it felt like they were, and now it's like, nobody seems to want that job. And like Belichick, I could understand, because I don't think Belichick wants to go through a rebuild and have like a young quarterback and try to put in the years, because he probably doesn't have that much time left. It seems like Vrabel doesn't really want to do that either, even though Vrabel's a younger guy and you would think would just want to go to a good situation. But the fact that Vrabel somehow wasn't the backup plan and Dan Quinn is questionable.
My last thing on the Josh Harris of it all is, I mean, these are real concerns on the Sixers end. I can speak to this, where there have been times where they haven't been willing to pay the luxury tax. And there's also been more than one example where they've straight up sold second round picks in the NBA, which that doesn't give you cap space. That just puts literally just takes money and it puts it in the owner's pocket. The team doesn't benefit from that at all. Just the owner making himself richer. So it's a little funny to me that I've seen that, and now I'm seeing the owner potentially being cheap in another situation, and I think that's pretty disheartening if you're a Commanders fan.
I think it's funny because the fact that Josh Harris also owns the Sixers has been a big issue for you as a Sixers fan, but it's kind of, in this case, kind of helping the Eagles because it's, serving as a detriment to the Commanders. So hope you feel silly, Brandon.
Well, I mean, then that doesn't make me feel good about the Sixers, though.
Silly. It's okay. Mike McDonald, Stephen, you said I want to talk about him. I should mention, by the way, we're sort of, I wouldn't say grading, but evaluating all of these. James Dater wrote about this at SBNation.com. Everybody can go read it. For the purposes of kind of continuity, give me a letter grade, Brandon, Stephen, for Dan Quinn.
For Dan Quinn, I'm going to say a C-.
Stephen.
I'm going to say D.
That's what James gave. So Stephen is correct so far. We've developed a nice little game for this episode of TGI Football. So let's move on to Mike Donald. Stephen, what do you think James graded the move, and what do you grade it?
I would think it would be an A, because that's what I would give it.
I'll give you partial credit. He gave it an A+. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, right in the same range.
Oh crap! I didn't let Brandon guess. The game is run. Sorry, but go ahead.
I'm gonna say B+.
Sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
So I really like this hire. And obviously, I think that it's pretty clear that the Seattle Seahawks right now are in a better position to win. Now, I still think at some point they've got to make a decision quarterback wise. Like, Geno's been fine, and Geno, you can win games with Geno as long as they continue to, draft players. And then they've had a couple of pretty good drafts here in recent years, and they still have some players like, Tyler Lockett's a guy they probably got to make a decision on this offseason. But I think it's a perfect transition head coach. Like, you get this young defensive minded head coach who can bring a lot of stability to your franchise after you were just stable for so long with Pete Carroll. And it's kind of the same mentality where they're going to try to build on the defensive side of the ball. And they've already got some really nice pieces there in Seattle on that side of the ball. And I really like what Mike McDonald did with the Ravens. And I think he's going to be a really good head coach. So I think this is a huge hire for them. And I would have to imagine whatever he wanted money-wise, they were like, sure, we got you because you were our top candidate. And so I think it's a really good situation. I think there's still questions about Seattle moving forward and what they decide to do at the quarterback position and what they want to build for the future. But I think this is a home run hire, and it feels like they're not going to probably have much of a drop off, I would imagine, in year one, going from Pete Carroll to Mike McDonald.
I like the upside swing they're going for here. Obviously, we don't know what Mike McDonald is. I almost did that. The Mike McDaniel. That's going to be confusing. Thankfully, they're not in the same division or something. They're pretty much as far as they could be.
They're gonna meet in the Super Bowl after this, and
there you go.
Be a thing.
Did you know they almost have the same name? Will be a popular storyline, I'm sure. But yeah, obviously, with any defensive coach, Dan Quinn included in here, the offensive coordinator hire is going to be huge. We'll see what they do on that end. But I like the upside swing here. It feels to me like this could be like, and this is, a big like leap of faith to make, and a lot has to be proven before he gets there. But this feels like maybe this could be the next Pete Carroll, and maybe this could be the next culture setter. It seems like there is something there with the Ravens and having this Aaron McDonald in this style of defense that maybe that's like the new like cutting edge of what's popular in the NFL, the new Vic Fangio style that everyone is chasing after. So maybe they're kind of getting ahead of the curve a bit on that. So I'm intrigued by this. I think A+ is a little too much because there's still a lot of unproven quality here. And again, really going to depend what happens with the offense still, because there's a lot to be figured out there. But I like the upside.
I do think this is the best hire in terms of, I think the Jim Harbaugh thing is kind of in its own unique box, and we'll get there in a moment. But I agree with you, Brandon. It has the biggest upside in terms of like he could be around for a decade, and you don't necessarily feel that about every hire. Not just like the Dan Quinn one withstanding. Like, I don't know that we feel that confident in Dave Canales in Carolina as an example. Like, there's a much more proven kind of track record, even though it's a small sample size for McDonald, that is worth believing in. Something I thought was interesting is we had KJ Wright on my radio show in San Antonio on Thursday, and he does radio in Seattle, and he was asked, why not Dan Quinn? Because obviously Quinn was connected to him, and KJ obviously played for him. And he said that the like general vibe is people wanted a reset. Like, they wanted to kind of disconnect and move on from the Pete Carroll era, not in a negative way, but I do think that there's value in that, Stephen, in saying like I look at the Cowboys as an example. You can go all the way back to when they first hired Jason Garrett in 2007, and they've always had somebody stay on staff every time there's been a change in power. And there is something nice to having a clean break, even if you believe it's the same general sort of type of head coach. Getting a whole new fresh set of eyes and fresh set of people in the building is a positive thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, it's, for some reason, it keeps getting brought up year after year now. Like, what are the Chiefs going to do when Andy Reid retires? And what's the succession plan?
He's not for some reason. He's a little older. Yeah. That's a fair thing to wonder about, is all I'm saying.
Sure. But Andy, year after year, is like, no, stop asking me about that.
What else is he going to do with his life?
I'm not thinking about it whatsoever. But like for a long time, it was like, oh, maybe Eric Bieniemy is the successor, or now it's Matt Nagy. And like, I totally agree with that approach. Like, several times, like when Andy Reid retires, let's go find somebody. Let's go find a new, young, innovative guy or another guy that you feel comfortable with, because I do think that there's this level of like complacency sometimes in the NFL where you get scared of the unknown and you get scared of making bets on other people, especially if you've had success with what you have. And I think it's just a bad way. It's a bad way to approach things in football, because things change so fast and situations change so fast. Even like Andy Reid's time in Philadelphia, like at the end, was bad. And I think that was because he was doing too many things and had too much control over the organization. He hasn't had any of that here in Kansas City. It's worked out really well, but I still think like Brett Veach is great for the structure of the franchise, but I think every team in the league should be doing that. The idea that let's just go get this retread guy and he's going to find success. Like, it's, like the Raheem Morris thing. I think that could be a successful thing because it's a little bit different of a circumstance than it is like a Dan Quinn. Like, we know exactly, Dan Quinn's the same thing as Ron Rivera. You knew exactly what you were getting when they hired him, and it's impossible to feel good about that. Like, I would always rather go for the unknown guy who's got something to prove than somebody who we know exactly who he's going to be and what he's going to accomplish.
BLG, the Atlanta Falcons chose Raheem Morris over Bill Belichick, and that's all anybody kind of cares to discuss from it all. Never mind the glowing reviews that Raheem Morris is generating. But that's when you do something like this, when you wine and dine Belichick the way that Atlanta did so publicly, you do kind of open yourself out to this scrutiny.
This is a different kind of retread hire, I think, than a lot of other ones, to Stephen's point there. Like, this is a big gap that Raheem Morris, going back to when he was head coach of the Bucs, and also like just how extremely young he was back then. And I don't even think he did that bad of a job in Tampa his first go around, as much as it's just that, expectations there were obviously very high coming off of what John Gruden did. And again, an extremely young candidate at the time. So, and after that, kind of almost had to like rebuild his career, was going from like, position coach to coordinator. Like, he had to like kind of like really rebuild himself all the way back up. So I think there's an appeal to that. And I think you look at, obviously his most recent results and how it seems to me that's exactly what you want out of coaching, is taking talent that isn't necessarily awesome, or if it is, even making it, making the talent better, perform at a higher level, getting the most out of what you have. And I think there's a case to be made that Raheem Morris did that. So I'm actually pretty interested to see how the Raheem Morris goes. Again, like I just said with McDonald and Quinn, it really comes down to, okay, can you nail the offensive coordinator hire? And the Falcons very much need a quarterback, because unlike everyone else, I've been the only one willing to say Desmond Ridder is certainly not the solution there. So I'm intrigued by that as well. And look, I've also been very much on the Bill Belichick. I don't really feel great about him post Brady thing, so I'm pretty okay with that.
Yeah, it's with Belichick. It just feels like that there really is no like give and take with him. Like it seems like he's going in there and he's like, I want control of everything, top to bottom. You're not going to have influence on any decision that we make. And why would you hire him if that's the case? Like, if you want to be a well-run, functional organization, like we see this all the time, like the 49ers consistently draft well, are consistently back in the mix, and Kyle Shanahan has heavy influence on all the decisions they make. But their front office is also really good, and they've identified really talented players and continued to draft guys who wind up being contributors on the roster. Like, just look at functional organizations across the league, and that's a common theme, whereas Bill Belichick over the last several years has been the worst general manager in football. So, like, I wouldn't be interested in giving Belichick the keys to everything and have him being the sole decision maker of my organization. So I applaud the Falcons for kind of whining and dining Belichick and making it seem like, oh, he's our top candidate, and then just saying, yeah, actually, we're good. We're going to go in another direction. Like, I'm kind of excited for what the Falcons do, depending on the quarterback situation. That's obviously the biggest thing they have to address, but we know they have the offensive talent. They've got a reasonable offensive line. We know they've got the skill position players, and their defense was kind of one of the more overlooked units this past season. Like, they were pretty good on that side of the ball, and they've got some talent over there. So I actually think the Falcons, I think this is a good hire. I'm excited to see where it goes and how their offseason kind of plays out.
Definitely interested in the Raheem Morris angle. I think it's definitely obvious that Arthur Blank is maybe regretful on not promoting him, when he had the opportunity after the 2020 season when he was the interim. I'm just a little bit less inclined to buy the Atlanta turned down Bill Belichick of this all. I think that, in the experience of, tracking Sean Payton rumors for an entire year when he was not, coaching in the NFL, there is a lot of value to being the unknown legend. And that was just the legend of Sean Payton, which is a fraction of what Bill Belichick is. I mean, Bill can take some time, reassess, build a barn in a football warehouse if he wants to, like McCarthy swore he did, and be constantly connected to everything. I mean, as time goes on, people will forget a little bit of this, or it will be further in the distant memory, and he'll be wined and dined by everybody next coaching cycle and will potentially have better options. I mean, again, I know that we're assuming a lot of things in the future, but it makes a lot more sense to want to coach the Eagles or the Cowboys or the Bears or the Bills or whoever a year from now than the Falcons right now, just because you want to itch to get back in things right away.
We're not even a year from now. There's going to be, as if a team like whoever, the Eagles or the Cowboys, whatever the teams you just mentioned, gets off to like an 0-5 start or whatever. There's going to be rumors like Bill Belichick's coming in now, like in season to save the season or whatever. Like that'll be a thing.
That's exactly what it was like with Sean Payton. I mean, and I don't foresee Bill doing as many appearances, for lack of a better word, as Sean Payton did. But I mean, Sean Payton worked for Fox and did all sorts of podcasts. And anytime he did, he was asked about the Cowboys job, and it was great content for us. But I mean, it just never, ever, ever went away. And I mean, the teams that we think could have new or could have head coach openings, I should say, are premier teams, very, very vocal and visible teams with, star quarterback situations. So that's all. That's the only part where I'm zigging a little bit where everybody's zagging. Like, I don't buy that Belichick was like begging the Falcons for the job, and they were like, toss their hair in his face. We're like, we're good, Bill. Raheem Morris is our guy. Jim Harbaugh, Stephen.
A+.
It seems that Brandon has found the article at SBNation.com.
I'm not giving, sorry, with all due respect to James, I don't care about it. I'm giving my grades. I can't speak for him, but I'm giving my grades.
So not only has Brandon, trampled all over James's hard work, he also spoke out of turn. He also spoke out of turn because, Stephen, it was your turn. What I was going to say, Stephen, is I am already annoyed at Jim Harbaugh. The Chargers have gotten so much love and attention for absolutely nothing over the years.
Baby.
And now Jim Harbaugh is just here and is ruining the quiet and peace that we kind of had for about 2 months. I mean, they are going to be obnoxious. And even when the Chiefs win the Super Bowl next week, in all likelihood, they're going to have won 3 Super Bowls in a 5-year span. And it's going to be like, watch out for the Chargers in the AFC West. And I hate every bit of it.
Yeah, it's so I think it's a great hire. I agree with BLG. It's an A+. I think Harbaugh is a winner. I think he will turn the culture around. I think he will get his fingerprints all over the roster and all of that stuff. Now, if he can overcome the curse of the Chargers, that's a different story. But I think it's a great hire. And it's like we've spent all these years now just like, Chargers are going to take this step forward. The Chargers are finally going to get over the hump. And it just kept not happening. And it felt like, I think we talked about it ahead of the season. Like they should have fired Brandon Staley after last year. Like them just wasting this year was ridiculous, but they landed Harbaugh because of it. So that's fine. But they've got a ton of decisions to make this offseason. Like they got to decide what they're going to do with Keenan Allen. They gave Mike Williams a bunch of money. Now he's coming off of a serious injury. Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, like they owe so much money on the defensive side of the ball, and their defense was terrible this year. Like they've got so many question marks just roster wise. Like Harbaugh's really going to have to take some swings, and they're going to have to draft and develop, because I think they're going to move in the right direction. Obviously, Justin Herbert comes back and you can keep him healthy. Like he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. And I think that they can eventually challenge the Chiefs in the AFC West, but I still think that they're going to be a year or 2 away from actually like contending with the Chiefs, because Austin Eckler is about to be a free agent. Like it just feels like their roster's kind of aged out at this point. And they've really got to draft and develop some young players and get some pieces around Herbert, because I don't think they can win with the current makeup of their roster.
I'm excited. I'm all the way back in after being out on the Chargers reluctantly, but necessarily. I'm back, baby, because I've been a Harbaugh guy. I'm not like a big college football guy, but back on the 49ers, I felt like I've said this before, I feel like somehow he didn't get enough credit for how good those 49ers teams were, and obviously how his time there kind of ended unceremoniously, and in no small part due to Trent Baalke, who clearly was not the driver of success that he thought he was, and everyone wanted him to be, or that was kind of how it was spun at the time. You know, they obviously kept Baalke over Jim Harbaugh. So I'm really excited to see what he can do. Justin Herbert has to be a lot better. Obviously, I rip on Lamar, as RJ likes to point out, but apparently I don't say anything bad about Justin Herbert. Not true. He has to do something in the playoffs after doing nothing, basically, except being part of an epic collapse to this point. But I think Harbaugh will be the coach to help him do just that.
I thought I was muted for a second. At the very least, the Chargers finally have an actual bona fide superstar. Justin Herbert is incredibly talented, but I mean, I don't think it's, ridiculous to say he doesn't have the level of football fame that Jim Harbaugh does. He's not the level of football character that Jim Harbaugh is. In fact, he kind of, shucks and runs away from that spotlight where Harbaugh embraces it. So at the very least, there is a sun at the center of universe of hype for the Chargers. And so it makes logical sense, but it is still really annoying. I agree with both of you though. Like he's the first adult in the room for the Chargers since what? I mean, Norv Turner. I mean that might, and that's a bit of a stretch. I mean, it's been a very, very, very long time. And so I'm excited. It will be great content one way or another to consume. And for that, I'm grateful. The aforementioned Dave Canales. This was kind of the one that I think caught everybody a little bit by surprise, even though the Bucs obviously had an impressive offensive rise over the second half of the season and through the, they were impressive in the playoffs. I know that they were outmatched by Detroit, but this really did, Stephen, feel like nobody, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way towards Dave Canales, but none of the heavy hitters want this job. It felt like question around David Tepper. It took, maybe taking a chance on a little bit more of an unknown quantity. That being said, I do think this is a solid unknown to kind of roll some dice on. There are a lot of worse directions. Like, I think this is a better move for Carolina than even Dan Quinn as an example, because you have the chance of the young hotshot offensive mind revolutionizing your team and hopefully resuscitating Bryce Young's career, even though it's only his second season.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of reasons why nobody wanted this job. Like, you don't have the number 1 overall pick and your roster is terrible. So I understand why Dave Canales took this job, and I totally agree. Like, I think it seemed like the top candidates just weren't interested, and I think it's pretty clear that David Tepper is not a guy that is liked by coaches across the league, and it is not really an owner that is respected right now. And it seems like he is not really fun to work for. But it's you got to take your chances, and hiring a young offensive minded head coach who is going to come in and try to see what you have in Bryce Young and hopefully put some more pieces around him is really the best you could hope for at this point with what David Tepper has done so far during his ownership of the Carolina Panthers.
I like the idea of maybe getting a coach like a year too early, if you will.
Right.
I think Canales could have been, this candidate that maybe the Panthers wouldn't have been able to hire. Whatever. I know that timing might not work out depending on who else they hired. It's not like they'd be hiring again potentially. Well, who knows? Next year. But I like the thinking of getting a guy maybe a little bit earlier. Maybe they are willing to accept some of the growing pains that'll come along with that, as opposed to needing this win now instant kind of fix. I think. And also, you weaken a division rival potentially. It's a nice little bonus. But I just think it comes down to, is Bryce Young any good? Like, can he play in the NFL? And there are really kind of big concerns about that. And that exists kind of makes me worry and wonder about his future in Carolina. Just what is the ceiling for him if you just have a total non-starter at quarterback? And that's what I worry about.
It's strange to say the least, but I feel better about the Panthers than I have. I don't feel good about them, but I feel better about them. This is the best you felt about the Panthers since when, Stephen?
I don't know, like Pete Cam Newton.
So, wow.
I mean, that they're, and I will say, like, Bryce Young, I think it's clear he's got physical limitations as an NFL quarterback. Like, and we all knew that. And I think not enough was made of that ahead of him being drafted. But also, their offensive line was complete and utter garbage last year. Their pass catchers, complete and utter garbage. All due respect to Adam Thielen, like, he wound up having a decent year because he was the only guy in that wide receiver room who could make any kinds of plays for them. And the running game was terrible. Like, their whole offense was just totally dysfunctional and totally failed Bryce Young on every level in his rookie season. So I don't think it can get any worse than it was last year for Bryce Young, at the very least. You're muted.
You're muted, RJ. Nice.
I had a mic issue. My mic came unplugged and I had to plug it back in. It was a big old deal. I'm back. But I don't know that we have to discuss the Gerard Mayo, Antonio Pierce, and Brian Callahan hires because it's been a while. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like enough's been said. I don't know if y'all.
I had one last thing on Canales. Like, is there any chance the Panthers would sign Baker? Bring him back to Carolina?
Why not?
They should. I don't think you should just put all your eggs in the Bryce Young basket. On
the subject of that, let's play 3 questions based on now that we know the answers to all the head coaching kind of, situations. And there's a lot, a little bit of time to go before free agency. But nevertheless, I'm going to spin a wheel with 3 questions and you each have to answer them. Are you ready?
Yep.
Yes.
Where is Kirk Cousins playing football?
Wait, where's the wheel being spun? You have to spin the wheel.
It's not really a wheel. It's 3 questions. I know the questions. Like, I'm not, it would be a wheel of 3 things.
Where's the wheel coming into play?
It was an analogy that hopefully was going to fly over people's heads because it didn't work out too well. But thank you for exposing it.
The best I can do right now on such short notice.
Where is Kirk Cousins playing football in 2024? Stephen.
I'm gonna say with the Vikings. I don't think he's going anywhere.
I was gonna say
let's be interesting. And
but that's
hypothetical, not the most likely non-Vikings team.
Yeah, let's say the most likely non-Vikings team.
What do you mean? Let's say I just said it. Like you don't get credit for crafting the question that I just crafted, and it's Steven's question to answer.
I was agreeing with you.
Okay, Steven, please. Sorry.
Okay, then I will say the Falcons.
I'm trying to think. Who needs a quarterback? RJ, what do you think?
Well, not the Saints who just gave Derek Carr.
Yeah, that's insane.
So the Falcons make a lot of sense. As an option, the Steelers make a lot of sense as an option. Although
they would never sign him.
The Raiders.
Yeah, the Raiders and Broncos are both going to be looking for a quarterback potentially. I guess they got Levis, so no on the Titans. And Colts have Anthony Richardson.
I'd like to see Kirk and Sean Payton. That feels like a fit.
Kirk honestly seems to me like the quarterback that could work the best with him. You know what I mean? Like Kirk isn't about ego and things like that.
If you're looking for like the next Drew Brees, like the next iteration of like kind of Sean Payton, Drew Brees offense, I think Kirk would be that.
Man, couldn't you?
And a quarterback who puts up good regular season numbers and then does nothing in the playoffs or underachieves in the playoffs.
Couldn't you just see Sean Payton? Like, I know he's coming off the Achilles, but people said we were crazy to take a chance on Drew when he was coming off the shoulder surgery in 2006. I mean, like, he is so gonna do that. Like, it is inevitable. He wouldn't fit in Vegas. I wouldn't like.
No, that. It doesn't. The personality. No.
Okay, so let's stick with these quarterback things. Again, most likely destinations that aren't their current teams, and some of these next two, in all likelihood, involve trades. Russell Wilson, Steve.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, he would kind of make sense for the Raiders or Falcons. Is like because I just feel like he's gonna be cheap. And so it'll be kind of like a Baker Mayfield thing this past offseason where he signed somewhere for a cheap 1-year contract because nobody wants him really.
The Raiders would be interesting in the sense that he could at least play against the Broncos, but Russell Wilson and Cliff Kingsbury in the same room is not, anything that sounds interesting to me. But
who was previously Russell Wilson's quarterbacks coach and then passing game coordinator is Dave Canales. So maybe there you go, Carolina to compete with. That's
way too big of a stretch.
I mean, I could see Russell Wilson just headed down the Andy Dalton path here, where he just becomes like a high-end backup quarterback for.
He's way too talented for that. He was so much more talented than Andy was when the wheels were falling off.
I think he was really bad last year.
I think it's more of like he signed somewhere when it's like musical chairs and there's only one chair left kind of thing, and so he'll just go there wherever that spot is. The only place that will take him.
I'm curious, what is Geno Smith's situation?
Back to Seattle?
No, but that's what, I'm looking. He has no guaranteed money left. I mean,
no.
He's got it. He's
Russ
on the book.
No.
I'm still thinking Kirk. I'm sorry. I'm not throwing Seattle out of the mix for a quarterback. Is what I'm saying. But definitely not Russ. Obviously, that would be wasn't it?
They can't do that. You can't reset the culture with your old quarterback.
No, I know. I'm just saying, but was it Brock Osweiler that went back to Denver? That was weird. After all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, Justin Fields, Stephen, if he's not a Bear, where?
So Justin Fields is the one I would most like to see with the Falcons, because I think they're just set up with talent right now on the offensive side of the ball. Bijan, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. I would like to see Justin Fields with a decent offensive line and decent skilled position players, and hopefully a stable organization around him and what Raheem Morris can hopefully bring. So that would be my number one. Also, Justin Fields to the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think would be awesome. I don't think there's a chance in hell that will happen, but I think the Steelers should seriously look into it. I don't think they're going to, though.
He loses too much for them to be interested in him. I don't really. I know. Everyone said the Falcons. Everyone said the Raiders. So I don't want to say those for the sake of just saying what everyone else has already said. I'm actually looking up every team.
Is it the Vikings? If they let Vikings for somebody
there, I could in division. Not impossible. Commanders, no. I'm looking at every team. What about the Browns? Like, what if the Browns try to hedge their bet on Deshaun Watson?
See, what is this?
Isn't that just bringing Joe Flacco back then at this point?
I don't think they can go. There's no way they can go all in on Deshaun, seeing how they had success with Flacco and also seeing how bad Watson was, not to mention, obviously, off the field stuff.
As a Justin Fields fan, I do not want that to happen because it does not feel like that's a healthy situation to go to right now.
My computer is spazzing out, so if I lose you both,
let's just wrap it up.
Well, no, last question. I can't see you though. But last question, then we can wrap it up because Stephen, you brought up how the Chargers should have fired Brandon Staley a year ago. I think we all said that. Like it was too big of a hill to like overcome. Who is that this year? Like who is the team and the coach that they should have just broken it off this year? I think I can think of two, and I'll just say them in case I vanish. It's Mike McCarthy with the Cowboys and Nick Sirianni with the Eagles. Like you could totally see like a year from now being like, oh man, this was super obvious that this was not going to go well. But Stephen.
Yeah, I think Mike McCarthy is probably the top one. And then I think one that probably isn't going to be talked about enough is the Jets and Robert Saleh and that coaching staff. I think they got to just reset and tear this thing down because banking on 40-plus-year-old Aaron Rodgers coming back off of an Achilles injury and like they keep just dragging their feet and being like, we got a window right now to win. And they keep not doing anything with it. And they have not improved year over year. And this year it was just all the blame on Aaron Rodgers getting hurt. And I just think that they're not a well-run organization and they should be looking to reset things.
I think that's a fair point on the Jets. It felt like really they could have went like 0-17 this year and there wouldn't have been accountability because the plan was like ruined. So, and I think it was always just like, well, this year doesn't count, but that sucks because it should. It just can't be like, well, it doesn't matter now that Rodgers got hurt, so we can't evaluate anything. That's not true. That's wrong, but that's exactly how they handled it.
All right, let's get out of here before my computer self-combusts.
TGIF.